Good morning and welcome back to Kivli Kids Cozy Corner. I'm Miss Kivli again. It is Tuesday, May 19th, and we're starting to wind down. So, like we changed the routine a few weeks ago so we could get through stories, and then we got through more stories, but we're going to keep that routine because we don't have that much further in our school year. So, chapter 14, let's get on with it and let's read about Mr. Willy Wonka, shall we? Mr. Wonka was standing all alone just inside the gates of the open factory. What an extraordinary little man he was. He had a black top hat on his head. He wore a long tail coat made of beautiful plum-colored velvet. His trousers were bottle green. His gloves were pearly gray. And in one hand he carried a fine gold-topped walking cane. Covering his chin there was a small, neat, pointed black beard, a goatee. And his eyes were the most marvelously bright. They seemed to be sparkling and twinkling at you all the time. The whole face, in fact, was alight with fun and laughter. And oh, how clever he looked. How quick and sharp and full of life. He kept making quick little jerking movements with his head, cocking it this way and that, taking everything in with those bright twinkling eyes. He was like a little squirrel in the quickness of his movements. Like a quick, clever old squirrel from the park. Boy, all those similes in there. Comparisons. Suddenly, he did a funny little skipping dance in the snow. And he spread his arms wide and he smiled at the 5 children who were clustered near the gates. And he called out, "Welcome, my little friends. Welcome to the factory." His voice was high and fluty. "Will you come forward at one at a time, please," he called out. "And bring your parents. Then show me your golden ticket and give me your name. Who's first?" The big fat boy stepped up. "I'm Augustus Gloop," he said. "Augustus," said Mr. Wonka, seizing his hand and pumping it up and down with terrific force. "My dear boy, how good to see you. Delighted, charmed, overjoyed to have you with us. And oh, are these your parents? How nice. Come in. That's right. Step through the gates." Mr. Wonka was clearly just as excited as everyone else. "My name," said the next child going forward, "is Veruca Salt." "Oh, my dear Veruca, how do you do? What a pleasure it is. You do have an interesting name now, don't you? I always thought that Veruca was a sort of wart or something that you got on the sole of your foot. Oh, but I must be wrong, mustn't I? How pretty you look in that lovely mink coat, and I'm so glad you could come, my dear. Oh, dear me, this is going to be such an exciting day. I do hope you enjoy it. I am sure you will. I know you will. Your father? Oh, how are you, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Salt? Oh, overjoyed to see you. Yes, the ticket is quite in order. Please go in." The next 2 children, Violet Beauregard and Mike TV, came forward to have their tickets examined and then to have their arms practically pumped off by the energetic Mr. Wonka. And last of all, a small, nervous whisper, "Charlie Bucket?" "Charlie!" cried Mr. Wonka. Well. So there you are. You're the one that found your ticket only yesterday, aren't you?" Yes, I read all about it in the morning papers. Just in time, my dear boy. I'm so glad, so happy for you. And this, your grandfather? Oh, delighted to meet you, sir. Overjoyed, enraptured, enchanted. Oh, all right, excellent. Is everybody in now? 5 children? Yes. Good. Now, will you please follow me? Our tour is about to begin. But do keep together. Please don't wander off by yourselves. I shouldn't want to lose any of you in this stage of the proceedings. Oh, dear me not. Charlie glanced back over his shoulder and saw the great iron entrance gates slowly closing behind him. The crowds on the outside were still pushing and shouting. Charlie took a last look at them, and then as the gates closed with a clang, all sight of the outside world disappeared. "Here we are," cried Mr. Wonka, trotting along in front of the group. "Through this big red door, please. That's right. It's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside the factory because of the workers. My workers are used to an extremely hot climate, and they can't stand the cold. They'd perish if they went outside in this weather. They'd freeze to death." "But who are your workers?" Augustus Gloop asked. "Oh, all in good time, my dear boy, all in good time. Be patient. You shall see everything as we go along. Are all of you inside? Yep. Okay, good. Would you mind closing that door? Thank you." Charlie Bucket found himself standing in a long corridor that stretched way in front of him as far as he could see. The corridor was so wide that a car could have easily been driven along it. The walls were pale pink and lightning soft and pleasant. "How lovely and warm," whispered Charlie. "I know, and what a marvelous smell," answered Grandpa Joe, taking a long, deep sniff. And the most wonderful smells in the world seemed to be all mixed up in the air around them. The smell of roasting coffee and burnt sugar and melting chocolate and mint and violets and crushed hazelnuts and apple blossom and caramel and lemon peel. And in the faraway distance, from the heart of the great factory came a muffled roar of energy, as though some monstrous, gigantic machine were spinning its wheels at breakneck speed. "Now this, my dear children," said Mr. Wonka, raising his voice above the noise, "this is the main corridor. Will you please hang your coats and hats on those pegs over there and then follow me? Yep, that's the way. Good. Everyone ready? Okay, come on, here we go." He trotted off rapidly down the corridor, with the tails of his plum-colored velvet coat flapping behind him, and the visitors all hurried after him. It was quite a large party of people when you came to think of it. There were 9 grown-ups and 5 children, 14 in all, so you can imagine that there was a good deal of pushing and shoving as they hustled and bustled down the passage, trying to keep up with the swift little figure in front of them. "Come on," cried Mr. Wonka. "Get a move on, please. We'll never get around to it today if you dawdle like this." Soon he turned right off the main corridor and into another slightly narrower passage. Then he turned left, then left again, then right, then left, then right, then right, then left. Whew, the place was like a gigantic rabbit warren, with passages leading this way and that in every direction. "Don't you let go of my hand, Charlie," whispered Grandpa Joe. "Notice how all these little passages are sloping downwards," called Mr. Wonka. "We are now going underground. All the most important rooms in my factory are deep below the surface." "Why is that?" somebody asked. "Well, there wouldn't be nearly enough space for them up top," Mr. Wonka said. "These rooms you're going to see are enormous. They're larger than football fields. No building in the world would be big enough to house all them. But down here, underneath the ground, I've got all the space I want. There's no limit, so long as I hollow it out." Mr. Wonka turned right. He turned left. He turned right again. The passages were sloping steeper and steeper downhill. Then suddenly, Mr. Wonka stopped. In front of him, there was a shiny metal door. The party crowded around, and on the door, in large letters, it said, "The Chocolate Room." Yum, yum, yum. Chapter 15, The Chocolate Room. "Oh, an important room this is," cried Mr. Wonka, taking a bunch of keys from his pocket and slipping one into the keyhole of the door. "This is the nerve center of the whole factory, the heart of the whole business. And so beautiful, I insist upon my rooms being beautiful. I can't abide in ugliness in factories. In we go then, but do be careful, my dear children. Don't lose your heads and don't get overexcited. Keep very calm." Mr. Wonka opened the door. 5 children and 9 grown-ups had pushed their ways in, and oh, what an amazing sight it was. Let me start that over. Sorry. See, everybody makes mistakes. What an amazing sight it was that now met their eyes. They were looking down upon a lovely valley. There were green meadows on either side of the valley, and along the bottom of it, there flowed a great brown river. What is more, there was a tremendous waterfall halfway along the river, a steep cliff over the water which curled and rolled in a solid sheet and then went crashing down into a boiling, churning whirlpool of froth and spray. Below the waterfall, and this was the most astonishing sight of all, a whole mass of enormous glass pipes were dangling down into the river from somewhere high up in the ceiling. They really were enormous, those pipes. They must have been a dozen of them at least, and they were sucking up this brownish, muddy water from the river, carrying it away to goodness knows where. And because they were made of glass, you could see the liquid flowing and bubbling along inside of them. Above the noise of the waterfall, you could hear the never-ending sucking sounds of the pipes as they did their work. Graceful trees and bushes were growing along the riverbanks, weeping willows and alders and tall clumps of rhododendrons with their pink and red and mauve blossoms. In the meadows there were thousands of buttercups. "There!" cried Mr. Wonka, dancing up and down and pointing to his gold-tipped cane to the great brown river. "It's all chocolate. Every drop of that river is hot, melted chocolate of the finest quality, the very finest quality. There's enough chocolate in there to fill every bathtub in the entire country and all the swimming pools as well. Isn't it terrific? And just look at my pipes. They suck up the chocolate and carry it away to other rooms in the factory where it is needed. Thousands of gallons an hour, my dear children. Thousands and thousands of gallons." The children and their parents were too flabbergasted to speak. They were staggered. They were dumbfounded. They were bewildered and dazed. They were completely bowled over by the hugeness of the whole thing. They simply stood and stared. "The waterfall is most important," Mr. Wonka went on. "It mixes the chocolate, it churns it up, it pounds it, it beats it, it makes it light and frothy. No other factory in the world mixes its chocolate by waterfall. But it's the only way to do it properly, the only way. And do you like my trees? He cried, pointing with his stick. And my lovely bushes? Don't you think they all look so pretty? I told you I hated ugliness. And of course they are all edible. I make everything different. Ugh. Sorry, let me start over. All made of something different and delicious. And do you like my meadows? Do you like my grass and my buttercups? The grass you are standing on, my dear little ones, is made of a new kind of soft minty sugar that I have just invented. It's called swudge. Try a blade. Please do. It's delectable. Automatically, everyone bent down and picked one blade of grass. Everybody, that is, except Augustus Gloop, who took a big handful. And Violet Beauregard, before tasting her blade of grass, took out her piece of world-breaking chewing gum out of her mouth and stuck it carefully behind her ear. Isn't it wonderful, whispered Charlie. Hasn't it got a wonderful taste, Grandpa? I could eat the whole field, said Grandpa Joe, grinning with delight. I could go around on all fours like a cow and eat every blade of grass in this field. Try a buttercup, Mr. Wonka said. They're even nicer. Suddenly the air was filled with screams of excitement. The screams came from Veruca Salt. She was pointing frantically at the other side of the river. Look over there, she screamed. What is it? He's moving, he's walking. It's a little person, it's a little man down there by the waterfall. Everyone stopped picking buttercups and stared across the river. She's right, Grandpa, said Charlie. It is a little man. Can you see him? I see him, Charlie, said Grandpa Joe excitedly. And now everybody started shouting at once. There's two of them. Oh my gosh, so there is. Wait, there's more than two. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5. What are they doing? Where do they come from? And who are they? Children and parents alike rushed down to the edge of the river to get a closer look. Aren't they fantastic? No higher than my knee. Look at their funny long hair. The tiny men were no larger than medium-sized dolls and had stopped with what they were doing now and were all staring back across the river at the visitors. One of them pointed toward the children, and he whispered something to the other 4. All 5 of them burst into peals of laughter. But they can't be real people, Charlie said. Of course they're real people, Mr. Wonka answered. They're Oompa Loompas. And that's where we have to leave off today. But tomorrow, chapter 16, the Oompa Loompas. So thank you again for joining me. I hope all is going well. I'll try to get a little more reading in. I'm trying to keep it with chapters, but at the same time, I'm getting a little concerned about time, so we'll keep going. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow, Wednesday, when we will start with episode 40. Holy cow, tomorrow's episode 40. I can't believe it. I've been doing this for a while now. We love you guys and care about you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Be safe, be kind, and remember to also be persistent. This is kind of a rough time we've got going on here, so if we just hang in there, we can keep this going. So thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.